Hello, and thank you everybody for joining us today at Driven 2021. Welcome to today's episode featuring VCI. Before I hand things off to Steve Terry, I want to encourage you to use our chat feature to ask any questions that may arise during our interview with Tavis from Volkswagen Credit. At the end of today's interview, Steve and Tavis will be answering questions from the chat live. Also in the chat, I've placed a link to register for the live raffle of Beats earphones today. And due to the nature of the raffle, you must register with your work email to be included. With all that being said, I'm excited to kick things off with BP3's Steve Terry and VCI's Tavis Addison.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Steve Terry, Managing Director of Strategic Accounts here at BP3. And I'm excited to introduce you to Volkswagen Credit's Senior Manager and Head of Process and Quality Management, Tavis Addison. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today, Tavis. I'm really excited to hear about the things that you've been working on at VCI. So Tavis, tell us a little bit more about Volkswagen Credit, if you would.
So as we talked about before, I mean, we're number one on JD Powers for a number of captive honors, specifically speaking about mass market and others. We have more than 1 million customers active within our portfolio. And right now, we're really focused on customer centricity as we move the needle forward towards making it easy for our customers to do business with us in our pursuit of digital mobility.
Thanks, Tavis. When COVID hit and government regulations started flying about loan extensions, deferrals, how did you handle all that before automation?
So before automation, as you can imagine, this was all manual. Tons of handoffs in regards to assigning that work, the customer request coming coming in, all the way to the actual processing. Working with BP3 and piloting our first experience on RPA, we were able to first process model the step-to-step activities in the customer touch point. And then taking it from there, we're able then to place RPA in this experience. And initially, we were building this bot as a pilot to prepare for hurricane season, when most of the requests for deferrals will come along, and we didn't see a pandemic coming. And my goodness, was this great because of the impact it had on the company and the amount of volume in terms of calls coming in for deferrals. It was just in time. So our payment reschedules bot or deferrals is really still our superstar today.
Super. And you know, so once you got the bot in place and you know, excellent timing as far as having been planning for hurricane season and then being prepared for a pandemic, what would you say were the changes from a business process perspective when you did get that automation in place?
Well, the changes we didn't see coming were really understanding that bots change, right? They're like people. And as you add new requirements, there's a stop and go. The other thing we realized is that by eliminating certain steps in the process, it was almost a double down, because we didn't have to check the work anymore because that first step was automated. So instead of actually alleviating 4 steps, we were finding even better efficiency by alleviating 8 steps at a time. The other thing with automation, specifically with RPA, is we were able to copy that code. So once you've built an automation and you standardize it, it's easy to replicate that code in other areas that follow a similar process.
Super. So let's step back for a moment from the automations and tell us a little bit more about VW Credit's customer-centric culture.
So our customer-centric culture, as I mentioned before, is really about making it easy for our customers to do business with us, really putting the customer at the center of everything that we do. So a lot of things that we look at today are really about, one thing that we look at is what we call our most valuable or most lovable product now, so the MLP. And at the end of the day, when we think about lean process application outside of automation, some of the things we look at is that if we were to get rid of this particular step or improve this step, would the customer know it? And if the customer doesn't care or wouldn't know that this particular step goes away, then is that value add or not? So we try to focus on things that impact the customer the most to ensure that we're staying in pursuit of making it easy for our customers to do business with us.
And within that context, did automation change the way that you approach increasing your customer centricity? I know you've got a customer centric culture, you're always pursuing that. How, if at all, has automation really had an impact on becoming more customer centric?
Well, I think because we're still early in our journey in regards to really transforming how we service the customer. What I will say is that process visibility has really changed how we step back and take a look at our processes, not just looking at how we can get more efficiency out of the as-is process, but taking a step back and taking a redesign approach. How can we do this differently? Specifically with self-service capability, allowing the customers to actually interact with us or make decisions on their accounts without having to put a phone call into the center. So those are things that I think that the customer demand in the market is looking for, and those are the things that are top of mind for VCI.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, when you put in this first automation, in a fairly short time frame, you went from having a backlog of customer requests to having an automation that efficiently took care of those customer requests and more. What was that like for your employees and for customers in terms of a transition from, having to deal with the backlog to having the automation be able to catch you up?
I think overall the experience was I would use the term exciting. It was new. Employees got an opportunity to be a part of the development process. So allowing them to learn what RPA is and to see it in action, be a part of the user acceptance testing, and to see it work was exciting for the company. Another thing that we learned with this is reallocating resources to more value-added work, because the old work goes away and now it takes less time to monitor and to do those daily activities, and your job sort of shifts towards handling the exceptions. So new skill sets are adopted. We get more time to focus on the customer, and quite frankly, the biggest thing that we can point to in terms of what does that time give us, it gives us more time to be innovative, to really focus on those complex solutions that we should be focusing on.
That's very positive steps forward. You mentioned that people's jobs shifted. How was the change management operated, and how did that flow for you? Everything happened in kind of a quick time frame here with getting this particular automation in. How did people adapt? What was your approach to being able to get people transitioned into the changed workflow and the impact on them?
Well, we developed an RPA strategy from the get-go. So we actually brought in our colleagues from different countries. We're a global organization, so we were able to host our own robotics conference to really set up that intake process all the way through the product launch. So we were ready. I would say. And being ready meant this is what your job looks like today. This is what your role in this overall experience is going to be tomorrow. And this is how much time you're going to get back. So the change management aspect of it was in place. One thing that I can offer here is that change management is not just the changeover of the activities, it's gaining the buy-in from our customers who are the agents and the business owners. We did round robins. We celebrated small wins along the way to get people excited about the launch date so that we were ready. And at the end of the day, it was a pretty successful launch in our early pilot level. And as it became more complicated, we've just continued to mature that process, especially when you talk about adding requirements, which means that you're enhancing the bots. So that's another change management turnover that impacts our people when there's real customers waiting to be serviced. But overall, the change management experience has been an exciting road towards success so far.
Oh, thank you for that. I know that that's something that a lot of companies sometimes overlook, and the really thoughtful and kind of what I would call a preparatory approach, really getting ready in advance, shows through in terms of what you've been able to do there, and also making sure that you're sensitive to the impact on the workers who are having to adapt to having digital workers as their new colleagues. We think you're a great example of how a company finds agility through automation. And you've just talked a little bit about how your process has changed and the way that you planned for and dove into this automation initiative. Can you provide a specific scenario that you think best exemplifies what the agility through automation means to VW Credit?
I think one good example, and I'll go back to the deferral bot because it really provides an example for us to follow going forward. To start, we have implemented what we consider a code review. So when we look at a process from an intake, or when the business reaches out for support, or they have a great idea, we don't just zero in on automation. We take a lean approach. So we have a team of Lean Six Sigma experts that ensure that, is this really an RPA opportunity? Maybe it's redesign. Maybe it's data availability, so it becomes a SaaS solution. But when it becomes an RPA opportunity, what we look at is how can we reuse this code? So one example in particular is when we launched the payments deferral bot, it was launched in the US only. But then we seen value to also launch that same capability for our customers in Canada. And we were able to launch that bot and that functionality for our Canadian customers in less than half the time we did in the US, simply by taking a copy and paste model, ensuring that when we build the document handover as well as the process modeling handover is in sync with our standards that we're setting from the lean team to our developers and to our testers.
I love the way that you've made automation just part of your overall process optimization, and it becomes a tool in your toolkit as opposed to over obsessing. We have found some customers, the shiny new object kind of captures their attention, and people that get the best outcomes, really do look at it as part of an overall process optimization. That's awesome to hear. Well, Driven, is about automation, and in terms of that, mix of different techniques that you bring for process automation, what has been the one automation that you can think of that is really you found most helpful for your business, if you can pick one?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, obviously RPA has really taken up the attention in the room over the last 2 years. We've had a big focus on leveraging RPA to get rid of the repeatable process. What I can share is some things that we're interested in, because we're getting a better discipline around our process. specifically around process visibility, being able to do a better job in measuring and having a common way of how we measure and getting models around that. The next step for us is process mining or task mining to get a better understanding real time in regards to seeing process real time. One thing is modeling, but modeling is still somewhat static. But now what we want to graduate to is being able to actually see process as it happens and react quicker to the changing environment. That's what I would land on in terms of where we're at now and where we want to go.
Oh, that is great to hear. Really kind of a maturation journey as you really got your initiative going. Do you have any suggestions for others as they start on their automation journey?
The number one suggestion is process visibility. I can't, in my 20 years, it is so much easier to do it right the first time if you start there. The as is underestimated. The skill set of a business analyst to come in and not jump to the solution too fast, but yet get a clear understanding of all the steps that we don't necessarily think about. We just do when we come in because we've done it for years. They get left out, especially with RPA. And then what happens is the development time takes longer than we expected because we just haven't captured the process and we don't have a good eye on what's truly happening at the desk. If you do that first, you take that A3 approach, planning is 80%. The other 20 is just doing. What happens is you get bigger buy-in from those who are sponsoring. You get faster adoption from your business owners, as well as the customers who are actually going to be responsible for the automation. And then finally, everybody just gets along a lot better when we're able to align on what the process is and what the to-be process will be.
That is great advice, Tavis. Thank you very much for sharing that. And now let's take a few questions from the live chat. For everyone watching, please remember to register for the Beats noise canceling earbuds using the link in the chat. You must register with your business email so that we can comply with government and corporate guidelines. If you have questions for Tavis, please enter them into the chat now. Okay, Tavis, the first question that came in is, speaking from experience, were there very many bumps in the road and how did you handle them? I'm laughing because I can't wait to hear your answer on this.
Lots of bumps. Yeah. I refer to it as turbulence before we can walk about the cabin. A lot of it's around education, quite frankly. There's two approaches that I speak upon a lot that you constantly have to remind people who are getting used to pursuit of automation. One is that the happy path is to optimize prior to automation. There are cases where, and a lot of them, where there's highly repetitive activity that's deemed as non-value add because that's how we've always done it, where you might put automation on that to get some cost reduction, right? And to get those individuals working on something that matters most to the company before you actually optimize. So there's certain things that you want to pull ahead and instead of waiting and taking a waterfall approach. Let's get some relief now and automate little pieces and chunks as we go along. Then we can step back and take a look and say, what can we do holistically? But the bumps in the road that those two pieces cause have a direct impact on adoption and resistance, quite frankly, of the practice of implementation of automation or even lean practice within process today. So if your audience, your participants, your sponsor have a clear understanding of there's two routes to go, we can pull ahead and get some relief now. And there are aspects where we can actually optimize first and where we should optimize first, but it's no just one road. You've got to do both.
That's great. And that really speaks to, I think, what I heard earlier with regard to agility and that holistic approach around processes, because you're looking at any given moment about how to use all the tools in your toolkit to get the best outcome right now as well as down the road. Thank you for that. Let me look here. Krista, are we seeing more questions in the chat there? Come on, gang, don't be shy. So here's another one. So Tavis, you mentioned lean thinking around scaling automations, across regions like the US and Canada. Can you revisit that? How the lean thinking, what did the process look like with lean thinking, and how did that benefit it?
Well, from a lean thinking perspective, it all starts with that as is creation. We leverage IBM BlueWorks in pretty much everything we do. We have a pretty robust scoring and prioritization model where the ideas come in, we score it, and that's how we force rank what we work on. And I mentioned that first because by having that front end sound and taking a lean approach to everything we look at, we're able to identify if, for example, that opportunity exists in another area. We can also identify where the same solution is already in place. And taking that lean approach in regards to understanding how many procedure steps, understanding domain alignment to what process, having a lens in terms of what systems are being touched in each step, what team, how many teams are being touched, how many people are doing the job. All of these things throw a quick output towards return on investment because you can get to the time quicker. Return on investment because you can see the volume much faster to understand what that new throughput will be. And at the end of the day, it's all about being predictive. Before we work on anything and before we put time into it, before we even talk to a developer, we have a good understanding of what that return on investment might be to determine is that potential we want to go after. So that's how I would answer that question in terms of taking a lean approach to scale. There's those aha moments of there's 5 other departments doing a very similar process. Let's take a look at their volume. Let's look at what the impact is to that area, and then let's go after it. And you can do that copy and paste approach.
Super. Thank you. Here's a question that came in that's probably more geared toward your IT organization, but the question was, how well can this whole model that you've taken with using RPA as a specific automation tool be replicated or used for designing scalable microservices? You can punt on that one if that's not really in your wheelhouse.
Well, what I would say here is that ironically or coincidentally, we are looking at enhancing our operating model. And what do I mean by that? Depending on your company, you may say that RPA lives within our IT, or it lives within the business. What we're doing is we're developing a model where it doesn't matter where RPA lives. So starting out with that COE approach and then going to a hub and spoke federated approach in the long run. When we talk about microservices, I can come up with an example where we have a product owner within our company that is the lead for implementing work manager type functionality, which helps our customer agents get work assigned instead of it being manual anymore, as I talked about before. So those things are happening simultaneously. From a microservice standpoint, I look at those as microservices. When we think about external vendors and how we receive information, and then it kicks off a process internally, we're looking at where RPA can team up and be that and close that gap which creates wait time in between those microservices. And the partnership between business and IT in that new operating model is going to be one. So we're literally going to be seamless in regards to how the ideas come in, how they get scoped, what microservice or relationship does it touch. And you can literally just kind of insert those correct automations along the way.
Super, thank you. When you were talking earlier, you talked about the approach that you took as far as really being thoughtful and putting together a whole initiative before launching into your first automation. What actions did you take in order to establish a common understanding for people about what the program was and how you were going to execute?
Well, communicate, and then you still got to communicate, right? We're still in that mode, being only a few years into it. Road shows was big. You know, not everyone understands what RPA is. Not everyone has a good feeling of celebration when you mention the word automation. You have to debunk what that means sometimes. For one group, it may mean, you know, is my job going away? For the other group, it means I'm going to get more time to do value-added activities. So for me, it's over communicating, telling the story, painting the end state that impacts our customers, and having that positive spin on how it impacts not only our customers, but how does it impact you in your role? And probably most importantly, letting them be a part of it, right? You're not doing it to them. You want them to feel like you're doing it with them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great insights there. Now, earlier you mentioned pivoting from reactive to proactive. Can you provide some specific examples where you were being reactive and were able to be proactive after putting in automation?
Yeah, I mean, I've shared a little bit on the deferrals bot, which is, you know, probably the biggest definition of being proactive for us right now. But also, if we think about, you know, lease ins, right? We have a lot of lease customers, and when we talk about lease customers, we know that they're coming to term. And now, when we look at our lease in process, we're able to have good visibility on the steps that it takes to treat that customer right and to make it seamless for them to get into another vehicle. Well, now what we've been able to do is not only determine what steps we want to automate, but I always go back to being able to understand the timing on those steps. So we know now if we get rid of step 32 through 37, we know exactly how much that step was costing us. We know how much time it was taking us, and we can run simulations against it. So having a common measurement system analysis so that we're all looking at success the same way, all the way from how it feels and facts around the data, makes it so much easier. So that's probably my best example of being proactive instead of reactive. And then lastly, leveraging BlueWorks. You can literally hand over to, you know, whether it's an external vendor coming in to support you or an internal body that's coming in to support you. You can literally hand over BlueWorks and you literally give them the whole world around the process. And they can run analysis off of that data that's tied to the process. And literally you can say in a year from now, we'd like to eliminate this step, or we'd like to eliminate this process because we see regulatory changes coming. If we think about it, regulatory change just probably hurts the most because it's not a when you want to do, it's you get the date and you've got to be done. And being able to create process visibility ahead of time and search for not only automation, but process redesign ahead of time makes a big difference.
That is great. No better way to, I mean, you have to react to things that you can't predict, but you know you're going to have reactive scenarios with government regulations. So using process modeling and measurement approaches up front. I love that because I also see oftentimes that measurement and process modeling just gets you ready for whatever comes at you. So that's brilliant. Thank you. In the course of this journey, and in particular, as you're moving towards scaling your automation initiatives, you talked a little bit about some of the next steps to take with process mining, task mining, and that sort of thing. But in order to advance an automation program, how are you addressing any resistance to change that you're encountering as you scale?
Well, one of the things that we're grateful for is strong sponsorship. Our SVP and our CIO they're an open door. They provide quite a bit of transparency to all who are going through this transformation within our organization. But to deal with the resistance, you need a change management arm, and we have that. Where they're sending out tons of newsletters or highlighting those successes along the way. I think that gets missed, and not only highlighting the accomplishments along the way, but pointing out to everyone who was a part of that. And I think naturally people want to be a part of it, right? The adoption for us for lean knowledge and skill set within areas is far surpassing our capacity. So the demand within the organization for more lean thinking employees or gaining that skill set actually exceeds our capacity right now. So that's a good thing. The challenges around the change is always combating again, going back to, we're always going to want to, by nature, always want to be able to do it the same way we have done. And getting them to understand that doing it differently is going to be better for our customers is always going to be a challenge. But the one thing that you have as a weapon against resistance is data. And that's why I always go back to that. Before you even get to an automated state, before you even present why automate, the best thing to do is show one of two things: the current pain in the process from a fact-based approach, or the current opportunity that we can go after that we're leaving on the table if we do nothing.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much for all of your insights today, Tavis. Really learned a lot and appreciate that. I'm going to hand it over to Krista to wrap us up.
Thank you, Tavis, and thank you, Steve, and thank you all for sticking with us through our sound issues. It was always exciting to have a live event. The winner of this week's Beat EarPod raffle is Donna Clarkson. Donna, be on a lookout for an email from us shortly. Our next episode will be Tuesday, October 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Our featured guest will be Lon Swain of LabCorp. He'll be talking about how they found automation opportunities within their organization and became more efficient. This is a cannot miss if you're in any of the life sciences verticals or medical area. If you haven't registered for Driven, make sure to do so you'll get our conference t-shirt and updates on our next and upcoming live stream. We look forward to seeing you all here in just 2 weeks. Thanks and have a great day.